The desert wind whispered through the canyons of Nevada as the sun began its slow climb over the horizon. Commander Jake Morrison stood in the briefing room of the Las Vegas Metro SWAT headquarters, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead as his team assembled. The air was thick with tension and the smell of burnt coffee. "Listen up," Jake's voice cut through the murmur of conversation. He was a 15-year veteran, his graying temples and weathered face testament to countless operations. "This isn't a routine bust. We're hitting the Hells Angels compound outside Boulder City." The room went silent. Every officer knew that name. The Hells Angels weren't just any motorcycle club. They were an institution, a brotherhood that had existed for decades, with roots deeper than most law enforcement agencies. Officer Maria Torres, the team's youngest member, raised her hand. "What's the intel, Commander?" Jake clicked the projector remote. Images of a sprawling compound appeared on the screen. Corrugated metal buildings, chain-link fences, and rows of motorcycles gleaming in the desert sun. "Anonymous tip came in 3 days ago," Jake explained, his jaw tight. "Claims they're stockpiling illegal weapons. ATF's been watching them for months. Tomorrow at dawn we go in hard and fast." Veteran Officer Rick Coleman leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "These guys aren't amateurs, Jake. They've been around since the 60s. They know how law enforcement operates. Which is why we're not giving them time to react," Jake countered. 4 a.m. breach, full tactical team, armored vehicles. By the time they wake up, we'll have them in cuffs. But 60 miles away, in the very compound Jake was planning to raid, a different conversation was taking place. The Hells Angels clubhouse was a fortress of concrete and steel, hidden among the rocky outcrops of the Mojave Desert. Inside, the walls were decorated with vintage motorcycle parts, faded photographs of brothers long gone, and the iconic winged skull logo that struck fear into rivals and respect into allies. Marcus Reaper Kane sat at the head of a long wooden table, his leather vest adorned with patches that told the story of his life. At 52, he'd been with the club for over 30 years. His hands, scarred and calloused from decades of wrenching on bikes and defending his brothers, rested calmly on the table. Around him sat the chapter's officers, the vice president, sergeant-at-arms, road captain, and a dozen patched members. The atmosphere was tense but controlled. "We got a problem," Reaper said, his voice gravelly from years of desert wind and cigarette smoke. "Word on the street is SWAT's planning a raid. Dawn tomorrow." A younger member, Danny Spark Rodriguez, slammed his fist on the table. "Let 'em come, we ain't done nothing wrong." "Sit down, Spark," ordered Bull, the sergeant-at-arms, a mountain of a man with arms like tree trunks. "This ain't about what we've done, it's about what they think we've done." Reaper nodded slowly. "Bull's right. Someone fed the cops a story. Question is who and why." The road captain, a lean man called Hawk, who'd been scouting routes for the club for 20 years, spoke up. "Could be the Desert Riders. They've been eyeing our territory since we shut down their meth operation last year. Or the feds just want to make an example," added Wrench, the club's mechanic and one of the oldest members. "They've been trying to paint us as criminals for decades." Reaper stood, walking to the window that overlooked the compound. The desert stretched endlessly, painted in shades of orange and purple by the setting sun. This place was more than a clubhouse. It was home. It was where brothers had laughed, mourned, celebrated, and fought side by side. "We don't run," Reaper said quietly. "That's not who we are, but we ain't going down for something we didn't do either." He turned to face his brothers. "We're going to show them who they're really dealing with. Not criminals, not thugs, but men who won't be pushed around." "What's the play, Reaper?" Bull asked. A slow smile spread across Reaper's weathered face. "We let them come, but on our terms." Back at SWAT headquarters, Jake Morrison sat alone in his office, staring at the case file. Something didn't sit right. The anonymous tip had been too perfect, too detailed. In his experience, real intelligence was messy, incomplete, full of contradictions. His phone buzzed. A text from his wife, Sarah. "Be safe tomorrow. Kids miss you." Jake's chest tightened. His daughter was graduating high school in 2 weeks. His son had a baseball game he'd already missed 3 times this season. This job took everything. His time, his peace of mind, sometimes nearly his life. But it was the job. Someone had to stand between chaos and order. He looked at the surveillance photos of Marcus Kane. The man had a record. Assault charges from the 90s, weapons possession, but nothing in over a decade. The file showed he ran a legitimate motorcycle repair business, employed veterans, and even organized charity rides for children's hospitals. "Who are you really, Marcus Kane?" Jake whispered to the empty room. He didn't know that in less than 12 hours he'd find out. At 3:47 a.m., the SWAT convoy rolled out of Las Vegas, headlights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. 3 armored trucks, 2 support vehicles, 15 tactical officers, the largest operation Jake had commanded in 2 years. Maria Torres checked her equipment for the 3rd time, adrenaline already coursing through her veins. This was her first major raid since making the tactical team. "You good, Torres?" Rick Coleman asked from across the truck. "Yeah," she nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. "Just ready to get it done." Rick had seen that look before. Young officers trying to prove themselves. "Remember your training. These guys might be bikers, but they're people. Some of them are veterans. Treat them with respect until they give you a reason not to." The convoy drove through the sleeping desert. The only sound the rumble of engines and the crackle of radio communications. As they approached the compound, Jake gave the final orders. "All units, we breach in 5 minutes. Remember, this is a weapons seizure operation. I want it clean, professional, by the book. Let's bring everyone home safe." But as the trucks positioned themselves around the compound and the breach team prepared to kick in the doors, none of them noticed the subtle signs. The cameras that had been repositioned the day before, the fresh tire tracks leading away from the compound, the fact that no lights were on despite it being the middle of the night. The Hells Angels had been many things over the decades, but unprepared was never one of them. At exactly 4 a.m., Jake gave the signal. "Breach! Breach! Breach!" The battering ram struck the reinforced door with a deafening crack. Wood splintered, metal groaned, and the SWAT breach team flooded into the Hells Angels compound like a black-clad wave. Clear left, clear right, moving to the main hall. Flashlights cut through the darkness as officers swept through room after room, weapons raised, fingers on triggers, hearts pounding. But with each door they kicked open, with each corner they cleared, a creeping realization settled over the team. Nobody was home. Commander Jake Morrison entered through the shattered doorway, his tactical radio crackling with confused reports from his team leaders. "Commander, 1st floor is empty. No suspects, no weapons, nothing. 2nd floor clear, beds are made, looks like nobody's been here in days. Garage is empty except for 1 bike with a flat tire." Jake's jaw clenched. 15 years of tactical operations, and he'd never felt this uneasy. The compound wasn't just empty, it was too clean, too organized. No signs of panic, no evidence of a hasty evacuation. Just silence. Maria Torres emerged from what appeared to be the club's main meeting room, her face pale. "Commander, you need to see this." Jake followed her into the room. The walls were covered with photographs. Charity motorcycle rides, veterans fundraisers, community events. A long wooden table dominated the center, surrounded by worn leather chairs. And on that table, illuminated by the beam of Torres's flashlight, sat a single piece of paper. Jake picked it up, his hand steady despite the adrenaline surging through his system. The note was handwritten in clean, deliberate script. "Next time, knock." "What the hell?" Rick Coleman muttered, appearing in the doorway behind them. Before Jake could respond, a sound cut through the desert morning. Low at first, then building into a thunderous roar that shook the windows. The unmistakable rumble of motorcycle engines. Not 1 or 2, but dozens. Jake spun toward the window. The first rays of sunlight were breaking over the horizon, painting the desert gold and crimson. And silhouetted against that sunrise, rolling across the sand and rock like a mechanized cavalry, came the Hells Angels. 30, 40, maybe 50 motorcycles, riding in tight formation. They didn't charge or threaten. They simply circled the compound in a wide perimeter, cutting off every exit route with precision that would have impressed a military strategist. "All units, we have multiple bikes surrounding our position," Jake barked into his radio. "Hold your positions. Do not engage unless directly threatened." Through his binoculars, Jake could see Marcus "Reaper" Kane at the head of the formation, sitting astride a custom Harley-Davidson, arms crossed, face unreadable behind dark sunglasses. The morning sun glinted off chrome and leather as the bikes came to a synchronized stop, engines idling in a low, threatening purr. "They've boxed us in," Rick said, moving to the window. "Every exit is covered." Maria's hand moved instinctively toward her weapon. "Are they attacking?" "No," Jake said slowly, lowering the binoculars. "They're making a statement." Outside, Reaper raised his fist. The signal was immediate. Every engine cut simultaneously, plunging the desert into an eerie silence, broken only by the wind. He dismounted slowly, deliberately, removing his sunglasses and hooking them on his vest. Bull approached on his right, Hawk on his left. The three men walked toward the compound with the calm confidence of people who knew exactly what they were doing. "You sure about this, Reaper?" Bull asked quietly. "There's still time to disappear into the desert." "We've been disappearing our whole lives, Bull," Reaper replied. "From society, from judgment, from people who don't understand what brotherhood means. I'm tired of running from who we are." Hawk scanned the compound with a tactical eye. "They've got superior numbers, body armor, automatic weapons. If this goes sideways—" "It won't," Reaper said firmly, "because we're not here to fight. We're here to talk." Inside the compound, Jake's radio crackled. "Commander, 3 suspects approaching on foot. What are your orders?" Jake watched through the window as Reaper and his officers walked across the open ground, hands visible and empty. No weapons, no aggression, just 3 middle-aged men in leather and denim facing down a SWAT team. "Hold fire," Jake ordered. "I'm going out." "Sir, I don't think—" Torres began. "That's an order, Officer Torres." Jake removed his helmet and tactical vest, much to his team's alarm. "If they wanted a fight, they wouldn't be walking in the open. They want to talk, and I'm going to hear them out." Rick grabbed Jake's arm. "You go out there without protection, you're putting yourself at risk. And if I don't, we escalate this into something nobody wants." Jake met his old friend's eyes. "Trust me." The 2 men met in the middle of the compound's dusty courtyard. Commander Jake Morrison, representative of law and order, and Marcus Reaper Kane, leader of an outlaw motorcycle club. Around them, SWAT officers held position in windows and doorways, while dozens of bikers sat astride their machines, watching with intense focus. For a long moment, neither man spoke. They simply studied each other, taking measure. "Hell of a way to say good morning," Jake finally said. A slight smile tugged at Reaper's weathered face. "You busted down our door without a warrant. Seemed only fair to return the visit." "We have a warrant. Anonymous tip about illegal weapons." "Funny thing about that," Reaper said, his voice hardening. "We don't keep illegal weapons. We run a legitimate motorcycle club. We fix bikes, we ride, we support our brothers. But someone fed you a lie and you bought it without question." Jake's eyes narrowed. "You're telling me you had advance warning of this raid?" "I'm telling you we have friends. People who watch out for us the same way we watch out for them." Reaper took a step closer. "You think we're criminals because we wear leather and ride Harleys, but half my brothers are veterans. We've got mechanics, construction workers, a school teacher, even a damn accountant. We pay our taxes. We follow the law. But the law doesn't seem to follow the Constitution when it comes to us." "The Constitution doesn't protect criminal activity," Jake countered. "Show me the crime, Commander." Reaper spread his arms wide. "You've searched the compound. What did you find? Tell me one illegal thing in that building." Jake was silent. The compound had been clean, suspiciously so, but clean nonetheless. "Nothing," Reaper continued, "because there is nothing. We knew you were coming, so we moved everyone out. Made sure you wouldn't find anything to twist into charges. And now, here we are. You with your tactical team, me with my brothers, both of us standing in the desert wondering what the hell happens next." The sun was fully risen now, beating down on the desert with the promise of a scorching day ahead. Sweat trickled down Jake's back, but he stood his ground. "You could have just let us conduct our search," Jake said. "Instead, you turned it into a standoff." "Could have," Reaper agreed. "But then you would have walked away thinking you were right about us, that we're criminals who got lucky. This way you have to ask yourself some uncomfortable questions." He paused. "Like who really set this up, and why?" That thought had already been gnawing at Jake since he'd seen the empty compound. The tip had been too specific, too perfect. Someone had wanted SWAT to raid the Hells Angels. The question was why. "You're saying you were set up," Jake said. "I'm saying someone's playing both of us," Reaper replied. "And until we figure out who and why, neither of us is safe." Behind them, the sound of approaching vehicles broke the tension. 3 black SUVs appeared on the horizon, kicking up dust as they raced toward the compound. Reaper's expression darkened. "You expecting company, Commander?" "No," Jake said, a bad feeling settling in his gut. "I'm not." The SUVs screeched to a halt, and 6 men in dark suits emerged. Federal agents, Jake realized immediately. DEA by the looks of the badges they flashed. The lead agent, a sharp-featured man in his 40s with silver-streaked hair, strode forward with the confidence of someone used to being in charge. "I'm Special Agent David Hartley, DEA," he announced, his voice carrying across the compound. "Commander Morrison, I need you to clear your team immediately. This scene is now under federal jurisdiction." Jake bristled. "Agent Hartley, we're in the middle of executing a raid based on our intelligence," Hartley interrupted. "Intelligence you've apparently compromised by engaging in unauthorized negotiations with the suspects." Reaper let out a low, humorless laugh. "Suspects. There's that word again." Hartley's cold gaze shifted to Reaper. "Marcus Kane, I've been tracking you and your organization for 2 years. You run guns, you traffic drugs, you extort businesses. And today that ends." "You got proof of any of that?" Reaper challenged. "I've got 2 years of surveillance, intercepted communications, witness testimony." "From who?" Reaper demanded, stepping forward. "From the Desert Riders? From rival clubs who'd say anything to see us go down?" The Desert Riders. Jake's mind raced. Rick had mentioned them during the briefing, a smaller motorcycle club that the Hells Angels had reportedly clashed with over territory. "Agent Hartley," Jake interjected, "I think we need to slow down and assess." "Commander, I respect your tactical expertise, but this is a federal investigation. I need you and your team to stand down now." The tension ratcheted up another notch. Jake's team looked to him for guidance, while the Hells Angels shifted uneasily on their bikes, hands moving closer to potential weapons. Reaper locked eyes with Jake, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. Whatever Hartley's agenda, it wasn't about justice. It was about making arrests, closing a case, advancing a career. "No," Jake said quietly. Hartley's head snapped toward him. "Excuse me?" "I said no, Agent Hartley. My team executed a warrant on this property. Until I'm satisfied the scene is secured and my officers are safe, we're not going anywhere." A dangerous smile crossed Hartley's face. "Commander Morrison, I can have you relieved of duty for interfering with a federal investigation." "You could try," Jake replied evenly, "but that would require explaining to my superiors why you initiated a raid without coordinating with local law enforcement, why your intelligence led to an empty building, and why you're so eager to make arrests when there's no evidence of a crime." The standoff between lawmen was interrupted by the sound of more motorcycles, this time coming from the opposite direction. Different engines, different bikes, lighter, faster, more aggressive. Reaper's whole body tensed. Desert Riders. Bull and Hawk immediately moved to flank their president, while the rest of the Hells Angels started their engines, the message clear. They were ready for whatever came next. Jake's tactical training kicked in. "All units, defensive positions. Do not engage unless fired upon." A dozen bikes appeared over the ridge, riders in different colors, flying different patches. They stopped about 100 yards out, engines revving in challenge. "This is bad," Rick muttered, appearing at Jake's shoulder with his rifle at the ready. "We've got 2 clubs about to go to war, federal agents with an agenda, and we're stuck in the middle." Agent Hartley seemed almost pleased by the development. "You see, Commander, this is what these people do. They bring violence and chaos." But Reaper wasn't looking at the Desert Riders with aggression. He was looking at them with understanding. "They're not here to fight us," Reaper said slowly. "They're here because someone told them the same thing they told you, that we'd be vulnerable, that this was their chance." Jake's eyes widened as the pieces fell into place. "Someone's trying to start a war." "Not just any war," Reaper said, his voice grim. "A war with the law right in the middle, forced to choose sides, making enemies either way." Agent Hartley's satisfied expression flickered, just for a second, and that was all Jake needed to see. "What do you know about this, Hartley?" Jake demanded. Before the agent could answer, the lead Desert Rider removed his helmet. Jake recognized the face from intelligence briefings, Carlos Viper Mendoza, president of the Desert Riders MC, and according to reports, a genuine criminal with ties to drug trafficking and weapons smuggling. Viper's voice carried across the desert. "Reaper, heard the cops were taking you down today. Figured we'd come watch the show." "Ain't no show, Viper," Reaper called back. "Just a misunderstanding getting cleared up." "That's not what I heard. Heard the feds got enough on you to put the whole club away." Viper's grin was predatory. "Shame to see the mighty Hells Angels go down. Guess that makes us the top club in Nevada now." Jake's hand moved to his sidearm. The situation was deteriorating fast. If shooting started, Good people on all sides would die. But then Maria Torres appeared at the doorway of the compound, holding something in her gloved hand. "Commander," she shouted, "I found something." All eyes turned to her as she carefully approached, holding an evidence bag. Inside was a cell phone. "It was hidden in a false compartment in the club's office," Torres explained. "Recent calls and texts to both SWAT Command and the Desert Riders sent from this phone yesterday. The messages claimed the Hells Angels were planning attacks on law enforcement and rival clubs." Jake took the phone, his blood running cold as he scrolled through the messages. Someone had orchestrated this entire confrontation, feeding false intelligence to law enforcement and lies to rival clubs, creating a powder keg, just waiting for a spark. "Whose phone is this?" he demanded. Reaper's face had gone pale. "That's a burner. Could be anyone's." But Agent Hartley had gone very still, his expression carefully neutral, too neutral. "Agent Hartley," Jake said slowly, "you said you had 2 years of surveillance on the Hells Angels, but this raid was organized in 3 days based on an anonymous tip. Why did you show up today specifically?" Hartley's jaw tightened. "I received intelligence." "From who?" Jake pressed. "Who told you to be here right now at this exact moment, when 2 rival clubs and a SWAT team would all be in the same place?" The agent's hand moved toward his weapon, and suddenly everyone was on edge again. "Don't," Reaper said quietly to Hartley. "Whatever you're thinking, it ain't worth it." But Jake understood now. Hartley hadn't come to make arrests. He'd come to witness a massacre, a confrontation that would justify a massive federal crackdown on motorcycle clubs across the state, giving him the career-making case he'd been chasing for years. The only problem was, it hadn't gone according to plan. "Everybody stay calm," Jake ordered, his voice commanding. "Agent Hartley, I'm placing you under investigation for misconduct and possible conspiracy. You're going to put your weapon on the ground, slowly." "You don't have the authority," Hartley began. "Right now I'm the ranking law enforcement officer at an active scene," Jake interrupted, "and I'm exercising my authority. Now." For a tense moment, nobody moved. Then Hartley slowly, carefully, placed his service weapon on the ground and raised his hands. The other DEA agents looked confused, uncertain whether to support their superior or comply with Jake's orders. "Officers," Jake addressed them, "your superior has compromised this investigation. I need you to secure him until we can sort this out." Reluctantly, the agents moved to comply, one of them reading Hartley his rights. But the crisis wasn't over. Viper and the Desert Riders were still watching, waiting. They'd come expecting to see their rivals destroyed. What would they do now? Reaper must have been thinking the same thing because he turned to face Viper across the dusty ground. "Viper, you and I got beef, I know that. But somebody played us both today. Tried to get us to kill each other while the cops watched." Viper's expression was skeptical. "Why should I believe you, old man?" "Because I'm offering you proof." Reaper gestured to Torres, who held up the phone. "Someone sent messages from this phone. Told you lies about us, told the cops lies about us. You really want to die over someone else's game?" The Desert Rider president sat on his bike, engine idling, weighing his options. Finally, he spat in the dust. "We ain't done, Reaper. We still got territory to settle." "Then we settle it like men," Reaper called back. "Not like puppets dancing on someone else's strings." After what felt like an eternity, Viper turned his bike around. "Next time, Hells Angels. Next time." The Desert Riders roared away, dust rising in their wake. Jake let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Maria Torres looked like she might faint from the adrenaline crash. Rick Coleman actually laughed, the sound sharp and slightly hysterical. "I've been doing this for 20 years, Rick said, "and I've never seen anything like that." Reaper walked over to Jake, extending his hand. "Thank you. For listening. For seeing the truth." Jake shook his hand, feeling the rough calluses, the strength still in the older man's grip. "I'm still going to have to file a report about all this." "Wouldn't expect anything less," Reaper said. "But maybe next time you get an anonymous tip about my club, you'll remember today." "Maybe next time you could just answer the door when we knock," Jake replied with a slight smile. "Where's the fun in that, Commander?" As the SWAT team began packing up their equipment and the Hells Angels slowly dispersed, Jake stood in the middle of the desert compound, watching the sun climb higher into the cloudless sky. He thought about assumptions, about stereotypes, about how easy it was to see what you expected to see, instead of what was really there. He'd come here thinking he was raiding criminals. Instead, he'd found something much more complicated. Men who lived by their own code, but a code nonetheless. But as he turned to head back to the trucks, he caught sight of Agent Hartley being loaded into an SUV, and a chill ran down his spine. Hartley might have been dirty, but he was federal law enforcement. Taking him down would bring scrutiny, investigations, questions that Jake wasn't sure he wanted to answer. The storm hadn't passed. It had just begun. The immediate crisis is averted, but both Jake and Reaper know this is far from over. Powerful people don't like being exposed, and the truth has a way of making enemies. 3 days after the standoff at the Hells Angels compound, Commander Jake Morrison sat in a windowless conference room at Las Vegas Metro Police Headquarters, facing an internal affairs panel that looked like they wanted his badge on a silver platter. Deputy Chief Patricia Walsh, a formidable woman in her late 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing, led the interrogation. "Let me make sure I understand your report correctly, Commander Morrison," she said, her voice cold and clinical. "You conducted a raid based on federal intelligence, found no evidence of criminal activity, then proceeded to negotiate with the suspects, refused a direct order from a federal agent, and placed that agent under arrest for conspiracy." "That's an incomplete summary, ma'am," Jake replied, keeping his voice steady despite the 3 hours of questioning. "Agent Hartley orchestrated—" "We'll get to Agent Hartley's alleged misconduct," Walsh interrupted. "Right now, I want to understand your decision-making process. You had a SWAT team on scene, weapons seized, suspects surrounding your position, and you chose to remove your protective gear and walk into the open. Do you realize how reckless that was?" Jake met her gaze directly. "I made a tactical assessment that the situation required de-escalation rather than confrontation. If I'd ordered my team to engage, we'd be talking about casualties instead of procedures." "Or," interjected Lieutenant Marcus Freeman, a by-the-book officer who'd never liked Jake's instinct-driven approach, "you'd have arrested the suspects as planned and avoided this entire mess." "On what charges?" Jake challenged. "The compound was clean. No illegal weapons, no contraband, nothing. You want me to manufacture evidence?" "I want you to follow protocol," Freeman snapped. The door opened, interrupting the argument. Rick Coleman entered, looking exhausted. He'd been in his own IA interview for the past 2 hours. "Deputy Chief Walsh," Rick said, his voice tight, "you should know that Officer Torres's analysis of the burner phone is complete. The metadata shows messages sent to multiple parties over the past week, including direct communications with Agent Hartley's personal phone." Walsh's expression flickered. "That's part of an ongoing federal investigation." "With respect, ma'am, it's evidence of a crime committed in our jurisdiction," Rick countered. "Hartley used false intelligence to initiate an illegal raid. He endangered SWAT officers, civilians, and created a situation that could have resulted in multiple fatalities. Commander Morrison didn't just save lives, he exposed corruption." "Or," Freeman said coldly, "he fell for an elaborate cover story from a criminal organization." Jake's hands clenched into fists under the table. "You think this is a cover story? Hartley's own agents are cooperating with the FBI investigation. The phone records don't lie. Neither does the fact that you showed extreme bias toward an outlaw motorcycle club over a federal law enforcement officer," Freeman shot back. The room fell silent. That was the real issue, Jake realized. Not the tactics, not the decision-making, the optics. He'd sided with the Hells Angels over the DEA, and no matter how right he'd been, that would always look bad to certain people. Deputy Chief Walsh leaned back in her chair, studying Jake with an unreadable expression. "Commander Morrison, you're suspended pending the outcome of the federal investigation. Badge and weapon now." 60 miles away in the Hells Angels compound that had been painstakingly restored after the SWAT raid, Marcus Reaper Kane faced his own reckoning. The chapter meeting was packed. Word had spread through the motorcycle club community about what happened, and Hells Angels from across Nevada had ridden in to hear Reaper's account firsthand. "You trust a cop," said Snake, a hard-faced rider from the Reno chapter, his voice dripping with disgust. "After everything we've been through, everything they've done to us over the years, you shook hands with a cop and called him brother." "I didn't call him brother," Reaper corrected quietly. "I recognized him as a man doing his job who chose truth over lies. There's a difference." "Is there?" Snake challenged. "Because from where I'm sitting, you showed weakness. You negotiated instead of fighting. Old Reaper would have gotten us all killed or arrested," Bull interrupted, standing from his seat. "I was there, Snake. We were outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded. Reaper's call saved this club. Saved it for what? Demanded another voice from the back. So we can play nice with the law, that ain't who we are. Reaper stood, his presence commanding immediate silence. You want to know who we are? His voice was low but carried to every corner of the room. We're brothers who stand together when the world tries to tear us apart. We're men who live by a code, older than most of the cops trying to arrest us. But that code ain't about being stupid. It ain't about dying for pride when there's a smarter way. He paused, looking around the room at faces he'd known for decades. The law's been trying to destroy this club since before most of you were born. They've arrested us, infiltrated us, tried to turn us against each other. And you know why we're still here? Because we're smart enough to pick our battles. So we just roll over when they come for us? Snake spat. We prove them wrong, Reaper said firmly. Every time they call us criminals, we show them we're businessmen. Every time they say we're violent, we walk away from fights we could win. Every time they try to define us, we define ourselves. Wrench, the oldest member present, stood slowly. At 73, he'd been with the club since the early days, had seen members come and go, had watched the evolution of what it meant to be a Hell's Angel. I was there when the cops shot Kenny in '94, Wrench said, his voice rough with age and cigarette smoke. I was there when they raided the Oakland chapter in '03 and put 12 of our brothers away. I've seen what happens when we fight the law head on. He looked at Reaper. I'm with the president on this one. Times change. We change or we die. The room erupted in arguments, brothers taking sides, voices rising. Reaper let it happen. Democracy in action, even if it was loud and profane. But then Hawk, the road captain, raised his hand. The room gradually quieted. I got a question, Hawk said. If Hartley set us up, who was he working with? DEA agents don't go rogue without reason. That stopped everyone. It was the question Reaper had been wrestling with for 3 days. I've been asking around, Reaper said. Turns out Hartley's been investigating us for 2 years, like he said. But he's got nothing. No real evidence, no witnesses who'll testify, nothing that would hold up in court. His career's been stalling because he can't make a case. So he tried to create one, Bull finished. Start a war, let us kill each other or kill cops, then sweep in and arrest whoever's left standing. But who helped him? Spark asked. Who planted that phone? Who knew our security codes to get into the compound? The room fell silent as that particular horror sank in. Someone in the club, or close to it, had betrayed them. We got a rat, Snake said flatly. And until we find him, none of us are safe. That night, Jake Morrison sat in his darkened living room, a glass of whiskey untouched on the coffee table. His wife, Sarah, sat beside him, her hand on his shoulder. You did the right thing, she said quietly. Did I? Jake stared at the wall, seeing not the family photos, but Agent Hartley's cold smile, Deputy Chief Walsh's disappointed expression, the confusion in Maria Torres's eyes. I'm suspended, Sarah. They're talking about forcing early retirement. 20 years of service gone because I wouldn't play politics. You saved lives. And lost my career. Sarah was quiet for a moment. You remember why you became a cop? Jake finally looked at her, seeing the same woman he'd fallen in love with 25 years ago, before the badge, before the weight of command. To make a difference, he said. And did you? He thought about Marcus Kane, about a motorcycle club that could have been annihilated, but instead rode away whole. About Maria Torres, learning that justice wasn't always black and white. About Rick Coleman backing his play even when it meant risking his own career. Yeah, Jake admitted. I did. Then you're not lost, Jake Morrison. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Need to meet. Important. Usual place. Reaper Jake shouldn't respond. He was suspended under investigation, probably being watched. Meeting with Marcus Kane would be ammunition for his enemies, proof of the bias they'd accused him of. He texted back, When? The response came immediately. Now. The Desert Rose Diner sat on the outskirts of Las Vegas, a 24-hour greasy spoon that had been serving truckers, shift workers, and insomniacs since the 1970s. At 2 a.m., it was nearly empty, except for a tired waitress and a trucker sleeping in a corner booth. Jake arrived first, taking a booth in the back where he could see the door. He'd left his service weapon at home. They'd taken it anyway, but old habits died hard. Exit routes, defensive positions, sightlines. Marcus Kane walked in 10 minutes later alone. He'd traded his leather vest for a simple denim jacket, but the intensity in his eyes was the same. They didn't shake hands this time, just nodded, two men who'd found an unlikely understanding in the desert sun. "You're taking a risk meeting me," Reaper said as he slid into the booth. "So are you," Jake replied. "Pretty sure your club isn't happy about you trusting a cop." "Some are, some aren't. Democracy's messy." The waitress approached and Reaper ordered coffee. When she left, he leaned forward. "We got a problem. Someone inside my organization helped Hartley set us up." Jake's investigator instincts kicked in. "How do you know?" "The phone Torres found. It was hidden in a spot only patched members know about. Security codes were real, not hacked. Someone with full access betrayed the club." "Any suspects?" Reaper pulled out a folded paper, slid it across the table. "3 possibilities. All been with us less than 5 years. All have access to the compound. All were conveniently absent when the raid went down." Jake unfolded the paper. 3 names, 3 photographs, basic information. His cop brain was already analyzing, looking for patterns. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. "Because whoever's dirty in my club probably has connections to whoever's dirty in yours. Hartley didn't act alone. DEA agents don't just decide to start wars for fun. Someone above him gave orders, and someone in my world followed them." Jake studied the other man. "You're proposing we work together. I'm proposing we find the truth before more people get hurt." Reaper's voice was intense. "You saved my club 3 days ago. Let me return the favor. Help me find the traitor, and we might find who's pulling strings in your department too." Every instinct trained into Jake over 2 decades of law enforcement screamed that this was wrong. You don't partner with criminals. You don't conduct unauthorized investigations while suspended. You definitely don't trust the word of an outlaw biker. But every instinct he'd developed as a human being, as a man who'd looked into Marcus Kane's eyes and seen honor, told him this was right. "I'm in," Jake said, "but we do this smart. No illegal searches, no vigilante justice. We find evidence that'll hold up in court." "Agreed." They spent the next hour going over what they knew. Hartley's career history, the timeline of the setup, connections between the DEA and organized crime in Nevada. By the time they left the diner, they had the outline of a plan. As they stood in the parking lot, Reaper extended his hand. "Never thought I'd call a cop an ally," he said. "Never thought I'd trust a Hell's Angel," Jake replied, shaking it. "We ain't so different, you and me. We both spent our lives serving something bigger than ourselves. You serve the law, I serve my brothers. Different uniforms, same loyalty." Jake watched as Reaper mounted his Harley, the engine roaring to life in the quiet desert night. As the taillights disappeared into the darkness, he wondered if he'd just made the best decision of his career or the worst mistake of his life. His phone buzzed again. This time a text from Maria Torres. "Commander, unofficial update. FBI found financial transfers from Hartley's accounts to offshore shell companies. This goes deeper than we thought." Jake climbed into his truck, exhausted but energized. The pieces were coming together, but the picture they were forming was uglier than he'd imagined. Somewhere in Las Vegas, someone powerful was getting nervous, and nervous people did desperate things. The storm wasn't over. It was just getting started. Jake and Reaper have formed an unlikely alliance, but finding the truth will mean confronting enemies on both sides of the law. Trust is a fragile thing, and in a world of badges and patches, betrayal can come from anywhere. The morning sun beat down mercilessly on the Arizona border as Jake Morrison sat in his truck outside a rundown motel, watching room 247 through binoculars. 2 days of following leads had brought him here, to a meeting that could expose the whole conspiracy, or get him killed. His phone vibrated. A text from Reaper. "In position. East side covered." Jake scanned the area. He couldn't see Reaper or his brothers, which meant they were doing their job right. The plan was simple but dangerous. They'd traced the shell companies to a man named Vincent Delgado, a lawyer with connections to both the DEA and several motorcycle clubs. If anyone knew who was pulling strings, it was him. The door to room 247 opened. Vincent Delgado emerged. 50s, expensive suit despite the cheap motel, the kind of man who thought he was smarter than everyone else. He lit a cigarette, checking his watch. He was waiting for someone. 10 minutes later, a black sedan pulled into the lot. Jake's blood ran cold when he saw who stepped out. Lieutenant Marcus Freeman, his own colleague from Metro PD. Through the binoculars, Jake watched Freeman and Delgado shake hands, talking with the ease of old associates. He snapped photos, his mind racing. Freeman had been pushing hardest for Jake's dismissal, had questioned every decision, had seemed almost eager to see him fail. Now Jake knew why. His phone buzzed. "That's your guy?" "Reaper." "Yeah. Recording everything." Another text. "Car approaching from south. Looks official." Jake shifted his view. A DEA vehicle pulled in, and 2 agents emerged, but not Hartley. These were younger, sharper. They joined Freeman and Delgado, the 4 men moving into the motel room. This wasn't just corruption. This was a network. "Damn it," Jake muttered. He needed audio, needed to know what they were planning. But getting closer meant exposing himself. His phone rang. Rick Coleman. "Rick, not a good time." "Jake, listen to me. IA just issued a warrant for your arrest." Jake's heart stopped. "What?" "They're saying you've been conducting unauthorized investigations, meeting with known criminals, obstructing federal operations. Freeman filed the complaint this morning. There's a bolo out on you right now." "Rick, Freeman's dirty. I'm looking at him right now meeting with—" "I don't care who he's meeting with. You need to turn yourself in before this gets worse." Jake watched Freeman through the binoculars, laughing at something Delgado said. The man who'd been pushing to destroy his career was now selling out his own department. "I can't do that, Rick, not yet." "Jake, I need you to trust me, just a little longer." He hung up, knowing he'd just burned his last bridge in the department. His phone immediately buzzed with multiple texts from Sarah, from Torres, from the department, all of it telling him to stop, to surrender, to come home. Instead, he texted Reaper, "Change of plans. I'm about to be a fugitive. You should clear out." The response was immediate. "Hell no, we're brothers now, we finished this." Something warm and unexpected flickered in Jake's chest. Brotherhood. Not from the men he'd served with for 20 years, but from an outlaw biker he'd met less than a week ago. He was considering his next move when the motel room door opened again. Freeman and the DEA agents emerged, but they weren't alone. Between them walked a man in Hell's Angels colors, younger, nervous, eyes darting. Jake zoomed in on the patches. Prospect. Not a full member yet, which meant he was still proving himself to the club. His phone nearly exploded with messages from Reaper. "That's Danny Spark, the rat. I'll kill him." "No, we need him alive. We need him to testify. He betrayed his brothers. The code says—" "The code won't mean anything if we're all in prison or dead. Trust me." A long pause, then, "What's the play?" Jake watched as Freeman handed Spark an envelope. Probably money. The young prospect pocketed it, looking sick with guilt and greed. The meeting was breaking up. "We follow them," Jake typed. "See where they go, who else they meet. Build a case so tight they can't deny it." But as Freeman's car pulled out, heading north, and the DEA agents went west, Jake realized they were splitting up. He couldn't follow both. "Reaper, can you tail the DEA vehicle?" "Already on it. Bull and Hawk are with me. I'll stay with Freeman." "What about Spark?" Jake watched the young prospect standing alone in the parking lot, checking the envelope full of cash, his whole body language screaming internal conflict. "I got an idea about Spark. Let him go for now." 3 hours later, Jake followed Freeman's car to an upscale neighborhood in Henderson, Nevada. The lieutenant pulled into the driveway of a house that should have been well beyond a cop's salary. 3-story Mediterranean style, manicured lawn, luxury cars in the garage. Jake parked 2 blocks away, thinking. Freeman had been dirty for a while, long enough to afford this kind of lifestyle. How many investigations had he sabotaged? How many criminals had he protected? His phone rang. Reaper. "The DEA guys met with Viper," the biker said grimly. "The Desert Riders president. They're planning another hit on my club, bigger this time. Viper's getting paid to start a war." "When?" "Tomorrow night. Some kind of big event. Lots of civilians around. They want maximum casualties, maximum publicity." Jake's mind raced. "What event?" "Veterans charity ride. We do it every year. Support wounded warriors. Couple hundred bikers, families, media coverage. If the Desert Riders hit us there, it'll be a massacre," Jake finished. "And the public will blame motorcycle clubs, demand federal crackdowns, give people like Freeman and Hartley everything they need to justify their crusade. So we cancel the ride." "No, that's what they want. Show that the clubs can be intimidated, that they're dangerous. We have to let it happen. You want to use my brothers as bait? I want to set a trap. Let them come, but we'll be ready. We catch them in the act, arrest everyone, Viper, Freeman, the DEA agents, everyone." There was a long silence on the other end. "That's asking a lot, Commander. Putting my people in danger." trusting that you and what's left of your department can protect them. I know. And if you say no, I'll understand. But this might be our only shot at ending this. Another pause. I need to talk to my brothers. This ain't just my call. Fair enough. Let me know. Jake hung up and stared at Freeman's house. Inside was a man he'd worked with, trained with, maybe even saved the life of once or twice. A man who'd thrown it all away for money and power. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Commander Morrison, this is Danny Spark. We need to talk. They met in a church parking lot on the east side of Las Vegas, the kind of place nobody paid attention to at midnight. Danny Spark arrived on a beat-up Kawasaki, looking over his shoulder every few seconds. Up close, Jake could see the kid was barely 25, too young to be making the kind of mistakes that would haunt him forever. You're that cop, Spark said nervously, the one Reaper's been talking to. And you're the one who sold out your club. Spark flinched. It wasn't supposed to go down like this. They said nobody would get hurt, just some arrests. The club would get leaner and stronger afterward. They lied. I know that now, Spark's voice cracked. I saw the way Reaper looked at me when I left that motel. He knows, they all know, I'm a dead man. Not if you help me stop this. Spark laughed bitterly. Help you? I'm the guy who betrayed his brothers for 30 pieces of silver. Why would you trust me? Because you're here, Jake said simply. Because you texted me instead of running. Because somewhere in there, you know what you did was wrong and you want to make it right. Tears streamed down Spark's face. I joined the club because I didn't have nothing else. No family, no job, no future. They gave me purpose, brotherhood, and I spat on it. Then earn it back. Tell me everything you know. Over the next hour, Spark laid it all out. How Freeman had approached him 6 months ago, offering money and protection in exchange for information. How it started small, meeting times, member names, then escalated. How Hartley got involved, pushing for more, demanding access to the compound. How they'd promised Spark a new identity, a fresh start if he helped them destroy the club from within. They said the Hells Angels were criminals, Spark said, that I'd be helping clean up the streets. But all I did was help dirty cops get richer. The charity ride tomorrow, Jake said. What's the plan? Viper and his crew are supposed to attack during the ceremony. Speeches, photo ops, families everywhere. Desert riders come in shooting, chaos breaks out, and Freeman's response team swoops in to arrest whoever's left standing, probably kill a few in self-defense. Freeman's running the response team? Yeah, he volunteered for it. Said it was important community policing or some bullshit. Jake's phone buzzed. Reaper, chapter voted. We're in. We do the ride. We set the trap. But we do it our way. He showed the message to Spark. You want redemption? Here's your shot. You're going to help us save your brothers. They'll never forgive me. Maybe not. But you'll be able to live with yourself. The next day, the Nevada Veterans Charity Ride assembled at Sam Boyd Stadium, hundreds of motorcycles gleaming in the desert sun. Families picnicked on the grass. Veterans in wheelchairs shared stories with active duty soldiers. Media crews set up cameras to capture the heartwarming story of bikers supporting wounded warriors. And hidden among the crowd, watching, waiting, were two very different groups preparing for war. Jake stood near the stage wearing civilian clothes, a borrowed pistol concealed under his jacket. Officially, he was a fugitive. Unofficially, Rick Coleman and Maria Torres had provided him with equipment and intel, risking their own careers. This is insane, Torres muttered through her earpiece. We're cops. We should be calling in backup, not running a vigilante operation. Backup is compromised, Rick replied from his position on the far side of the stadium. Half the response team is Freeman's people. We call it in, we tip our hand. Across the field, Reaper sat astride his Harley, Bull and Hawk flanking him. The Hells Angels had turned out in force, over 100 riders, all of them knowing this might be a trap but coming anyway because their brothers asked them to. Danny Spark stood apart from the main group, no longer wearing his prospect patch. Wrench had personally torn it from his vest that morning, the ultimate dishonor. But the old mechanic had also given Spark one chance. Protect the club today and maybe he could start earning his way back. The ceremony began. A wounded Marine spoke about the support he'd received from the riding community. A young girl whose father had died overseas sang the national anthem. Beautiful, genuine moments that were about to be shattered by violence. Jake's earpiece crackled. Torres's voice, urgent. Movement on the east perimeter. Multiple bikes, desert riders' colors. How many? Jake asked quietly. 20, maybe 30. They're spreading out, trying to look casual. Through his sunglasses, Jake spotted them, Viper and his crew, pretending to be part of the crowd but clearly preparing for something. Then he saw Freeman. The lieutenant stood near the response team's staging area, hand on his radio, eyes scanning the crowd with predatory focus. "It's about to go down," Jake said. "Everyone ready?" "Ready," Torres confirmed. "In position," Rick added. "We got this." Reaper's gravelly voice came through. He was using a police scanner Spark had provided, hearing everything on law enforcement channels. The Marine finished his speech to applause. As the crowd focused on the stage, Viper gave the signal. 20 desert riders reached for weapons, but they never got the chance to draw. "Now!" Jake shouted. Everything happened at once. The Hells Angels, who'd been spread throughout the crowd, moved with military precision, tackling desert riders before they could fire a shot. Not fighting, just subduing, just controlling. Rick and Torres's team, a handful of honest cops who'd chosen to trust Jake, swept in with badges out, making arrests. And Jake himself ran straight for Freeman. The lieutenant saw him coming, eyes widening in shock and rage. His hand moved to his weapon, but Jake was faster. 20 years of tactical training versus a dirty cop who'd gotten soft and slow. Jake hit Freeman like a linebacker, both men crashing to the ground. They struggled, Freeman trying to draw his gun, Jake trying to pin him. "It's over, Marcus," Jake shouted, using Freeman's first name like an accusation. "We have everything. The meetings, the money, the whole conspiracy." Freeman's face twisted with hatred. "You self-righteous son of a bitch. You think you're a hero? You're a traitor, siding with criminals over your own." "My own?" Jake forced Freeman's arm behind his back, cuffing him with his own handcuffs. "You're not my own. You're a disgrace to the badge." Around them, chaos was being methodically contained. The desert riders were being arrested. Families were being evacuated. And Reaper's Club was helping rather than hindering, showing the media and the public that they were part of the solution, not the problem. But one person was missing. "Where's Viper?" Jake spoke into his mic. "He ran," Torres responded, heading for the north parking lot. "I got him," came Danny Sparks' voice. "Spark, no, don't engage alone." But the young prospect was already sprinting across the field, his bike roaring to life. He'd seen his chance for redemption and he was taking it. Viper reached his custom chopper, kicking it to life. But before he could escape, another bike slammed into his path. Danny Spark, all of 25 years old and terrified but standing his ground. "It's over, Viper," Spark shouted over the engines. The Desert Riders' president laughed. "You? You're the traitor who sold out his own club. You got no room to talk." "You're right," Spark admitted. "I ain't got room to talk, but I got room to act." He pulled out his phone, showing Viper the screen. "See this? Live stream, going straight to the FBI, the media, everyone. Every word you say is being recorded. You run, you're guilty. You fight, you're guilty. You want to walk away from this, you surrender right now." Viper's hand moved to his waistband, where Jake knew he kept a gun. "Don't," Spark said quietly. "I made enough mistakes. Don't make me make another one." For a long moment, the two men faced each other across their idling motorcycles. Then Viper slowly raised his hands. By the time Jake and Torres arrived, Spark had Viper on his knees, hands behind his head. The whole arrest captured on video for the world to see. Reaper dismounted his Harley, walking over to where Spark stood. The young man looked up at his president, expecting condemnation, rejection, exile. Instead, Reaper put a hand on his shoulder. "You betrayed us," the old biker said. "That's a fact. The hurt you caused won't heal quick." "I know," Spark whispered. "But you also just saved lives. Put yourself on the line for your brothers when you could have run. That counts for something." Reaper's grip tightened. "You got a long road ahead, earning back trust. Years, maybe. You good with that?" Spark nodded, tears streaming down his face. "However long it takes. Then get to work." That evening, as the sun set over Las Vegas, Jake Morrison sat in Deputy Chief Walsh's office. She'd called him in personally, which could mean anything from reinstatement to formal charges. Walsh studied him for a long moment, then slid his badge and service weapon across the desk. "You're a pain in the ass, Morrison," she said. "Yes, ma'am. You disobeyed orders, conducted unauthorized investigations, associated with known criminals, and made my life a bureaucratic nightmare." "Yes, ma'am. You also exposed the largest corruption network in this department's history, prevented a mass casualty event and saved the lives of countless officers and civilians. Jake met her eyes. Just doing my job, Ma'am. Walsh almost smiled. Your suspension is lifted. You're back on active duty. But Morrison? Yes, ma'am. Next time you're going to blow up an entire federal investigation and half the department, at least give me a heads up. I'll try, ma'am. As Jake left the building, his phone buzzed. A text from Reaper. Drinks at the clubhouse. You earned it. Jake looked at the message for a long time. Then he texted back, rain check. Got to see my family. But soon. Family first. Always. Jake climbed into his truck, exhausted but lighter than he'd felt in years. Tomorrow he'd deal with the paperwork, the investigations, the consequences. Tomorrow he'd face the media questions and the department politics. Tonight, he was going home to his wife and kids. But as he drove through the neon-lit streets of Las Vegas, he couldn't help but smile. Somewhere out in the desert, a motorcycle club was having a party, celebrating survival and redemption. And for the first time in his career, Jake Morrison understood that sometimes the line between law and outlaw wasn't as clear as the textbooks claimed. Sometimes it came down to honor, and honor wore many different uniforms. The conspiracy is exposed, the traitors are arrested, and unlikely alliances have been forged. But the question remains, can two different worlds truly coexist, or will old prejudices tear apart what was built in the desert sun? 6 months later, the desert dawn broke over Nevada with the same indifferent beauty it had for millennia. But the landscape of law enforcement and motorcycle clubs in the state had changed forever. Commander Jake Morrison, recently promoted to captain, stood at the window of his new office watching the sunrise and thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The trials had been long and public. Lieutenant Marcus Freeman was serving 15 years for corruption, conspiracy, and racketeering. Agent David Hartley got 20, with additional federal charges pending. Vincent Delgado, the lawyer who'd connected them all, had turned state's evidence to avoid life in prison and was currently in witness protection, looking over his shoulder for the rest of his days. Viper and a dozen desert riders were doing time for attempted murder and weapons charges. The club had fractured, members scattered across the Southwest, their territory absorbed by smaller, quieter clubs, and through it all, the Hells Angels had emerged not as villains, but as complicated heroes, men who lived outside mainstream society, but had helped prevent a massacre and expose corruption. A knock on his door pulled Jake from his thoughts. Come in. Maria Torres entered, now wearing sergeant's stripes. The young officer had been promoted after her testimony at the trials, her technical expertise and courage under fire, earning recognition that had been long overdue. Morning, Captain, she said with a smile. The community policing meeting starts in an hour. You ready? Jake sighed. As ready as I'll ever be. The meeting was his idea, a monthly forum where law enforcement, community leaders, and yes, motorcycle club representatives could discuss issues and find common ground. It was revolutionary, controversial, and absolutely necessary after everything that had happened. Think Reaper will show? Torres asked. He said he would. How is he? Jake smiled slightly. Same as always. Stubborn, principled, impossible to predict. In truth, Reaper had become something of a local legend. The biker who'd stood down a SWAT team, exposed federal corruption, and helped save hundreds of lives was no longer just the president of a motorcycle club. He was a symbol of resistance against corruption, of loyalty to principles over convenience. Not everyone appreciated it. Some in law enforcement still saw the Hells Angels as criminals getting away with lawlessness. Some in the motorcycle community saw Reaper's cooperation with cops as betrayal of the outlaw ethos. But most people, Jake had found, understood nuance. They understood that the world was complicated, that good people could make bad choices, and bad situations could bring out the best in people. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Good luck at the meeting. Kids and I will watch the news coverage. We're proud of you. Jake felt his throat tighten. The past 6 months had been hell on his family. Death threats from Freeman's supporters, media camping on their lawn, his daughter's graduation almost ruined by protesters on both sides. But Sarah and the kids had stood by him, understanding that some things were worth fighting for. Captain, Torres's voice brought him back. You okay? Yeah, just thinking about how far we've come, and how far we still have to go. That too. The community center was packed. Jake scanned the crowd. police officers in uniform, city council members, business owners, and prominently members of several motorcycle clubs wearing their colors with pride. The Hells Angels sat in the front row, Reaper in the center, Bull and Hawk flanking him, and to Jake's mild surprise, Danny Spark sitting with them. The young man wore a prospect patch again. He'd been voted back into that probationary status, a chance to earn his way back into the Brotherhood. It was more mercy than most traitors got, and Spark seemed determined not to waste it. Wrench, the old mechanic, caught Jake's eye and nodded. The gesture was small but significant. Respect, earned through action rather than words. Rick Coleman sat with the police contingent looking uncomfortable. He'd been passed over for promotion, too much association with Jake's unorthodox methods, but he'd told Jake privately that he didn't regret a thing. Deputy Chief Walsh called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice carrying authority. 6 months ago, this city was on the brink of a tragedy that was prevented not through traditional law enforcement, but through cooperation between groups that historically have been adversaries. She gestured to Jake. "Captain Morrison will be leading today's discussion on community policing initiatives and how we can build on what we've learned." Jake stood, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes, some friendly, some hostile, all expectant. "I'm not going to pretend the past 6 months have been easy," he started. "We've all lost people we thought we could trust. We've all had to question assumptions we thought were solid. But we've also learned something valuable, that honor and corruption don't follow the lines we've drawn." He looked directly at Reaper. "There are criminals who wear badges, and there are honorable men who wear patches. The uniform doesn't make the person. The choices do." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some cops shifted uncomfortably. Some bikers nodded. "Today, we're here to talk about concrete steps," Jake continued. "How do we build trust between law enforcement and communities that have historically been at odds? How do we police fairly without profiling? How do we hold everyone, cops and civilians, to the same standard of law?" A hand shot up from the police section. Officer John Dawson, a veteran who'd been openly skeptical of Jake's approach. "Captain Morrison, with all due respect, how do we trust people who explicitly identify as outlaws? The Hells Angels, the other clubs, they literally call themselves 1%ers, meaning they're outside the 99% of law-abiding bikers. Doesn't that tell us everything we need to know?" Before Jake could answer, Reaper stood. "Officer Dawson, can I address that?" The room went quiet. Walsh nodded. "Mr. Kane, you have the floor." Reaper turned to face the crowd, his presence commanding despite the casual leather and denim. "The 1%er thing started as a rebellion against being told who we were," he explained. "After World War II, veterans came home to a country that didn't want to deal with them. They'd seen things, done things, and the polite society just wanted them to put on suits and forget. So they got bikes and rode together, and someone called them outlaws, and they said, 'Fine, we're outlaws.'" He paused, making eye contact with several police officers. "But being an outlaw doesn't mean being a criminal. It means living by your own code instead of society's code. And our code, the real Hells Angels code, says you stand by your brothers. You don't lie, you don't steal, you earn respect through action. Is that so different from what cops are supposed to do?" Dawson wasn't convinced. "But your clubs have criminal members, drug dealers, weapons traffickers, and your departments have corrupt cops," Reaper shot back. "Does that make all cops criminals? Freeman was a lieutenant. Hartley was a federal agent. Should I judge every law enforcement officer by their actions?" The room erupted in arguments, voices rising. Walsh banged her gavel, calling for order. Jake stepped in. "This is exactly why we're here, to have these hard conversations. Officer Dawson raises a valid point. There are criminal elements in some motorcycle clubs. Mr. Kane is equally right that there are bad actors in law enforcement. The question is, do we define entire groups by their worst members, or do we judge individuals by their actions?" A city council member spoke up. "Captain Morrison, what are the practical applications here? How does this philosophy translate to actual policing?" "Good question," Jake said. "First, we stop profiling. No more pulling over bikers just because they're wearing club colors. We enforce actual laws, speeding, illegal modifications, whatever, but we do it fairly. Second," he continued, "we open communication channels. If there's a real criminal threat involving a club, we reach out to club leadership first. Give them a chance to police their own, same as we do with other communities. Third, we recognize that motorcycle clubs do a lot of good. Charity rides, veteran support, community protection. We acknowledge that and even partner with them when appropriate. A businesswoman raised her hand. Mr. Kane, would your club be willing to participate in things like neighborhood watch programs, community events? Reaper considered. Depends on the event. We're not going to be your token bikers to make the department look diverse. But if it's genuine, if you actually want our help, not just our appearance, then yeah, we'd consider it. What about other clubs? Another officer asked. The Hells Angels might be willing to work with us, but what about the more extreme groups? That's on you to figure out, Reaper said bluntly. Every club is different. Some are criminals hiding behind brotherhood. Others are brothers who happen to ride. You're the cops. Do the investigation, make the distinction. Danny Spark, surprising everyone, stood up. His voice shook slightly, but he spoke clearly. I betrayed my club, he said, and the room went silent. I let someone convince me that wearing a patch made me a criminal, that my brothers were the enemy, and I almost got people killed because I believed that lie. He looked at the police officers. Not all bikers are saints, but not all of us are criminals either. And if you can't tell the difference, you're no better than the dirty cops who set us up. Then he looked at the bikers. And we can't just hide behind outlaw like it means we're above the law. We live in a society. We use the roads. We benefit from order. We've got to meet them halfway. Jake saw Reaper's face, saw the pride there. Spark was earning his way back, word by painful word. The discussion continued for another 2 hours. Sometimes heated, sometimes productive, always honest. By the end, they'd established several concrete initiatives, a liaison program where select officers and club members would meet monthly to address concerns, a commitment from several clubs to participate in veteran support programs alongside police, a pledge from the department to review arrest records and identify patterns of profiling, a community fund, supported by both law enforcement and motorcycle clubs, for youth programs in at-risk neighborhoods. It wasn't perfect. It wouldn't solve everything, but it was a start. After the meeting, Jake and Reaper stood outside in the parking lot, watching the sun climb toward noon. That went better than I expected, Reaper admitted. Low bar, Jake replied with a slight smile. True enough. Reaper pulled out a cigarette, then hesitated. You mind? Your lungs. Reaper lit up, taking a long drag. You know we're both going to catch hell for this, right? You from cops who think you're too soft, me from bikers who think I'm too cooperative. Yeah, worth it. Jake thought about Maria Torres, who'd learned that justice was more than just enforcing rules. About Rick Coleman, who'd risked everything to back his friend's play. About Danny Spark, who'd fallen and was fighting his way back up. About his own kids, who were growing up in a world where maybe, just maybe, people could look past uniforms and see the person underneath. Yeah, Jake said. It's worth it. Reaper nodded slowly. Morrison, I never thought I'd say this to a cop, but you're all right. Kane, I never thought I'd say this to a Hells Angel, but same. They shook hands, the grip firm and honest. See you at next month's meeting? Reaper asked. Wouldn't miss it. As Reaper mounted his Harley, Bull and Hawk joining him, Jake watched them ride out of the parking lot. 3 men in leather and patches, riding into the desert sun, living by their own code, but not at war with the world anymore. His phone rang. Sarah. Hey, he answered. We watched the coverage, she said, warmth in her voice. You did good, Jake. You changed things. We'll see. Change is slow, but it starts somewhere. And today it started with you. After they hung up, Jake stood in the parking lot for a few more minutes, feeling the desert wind on his face. 6 months ago, he'd been a by-the-book commander who saw the world in black and white. Now he was a captain who understood that the most important truths lived in the gray areas. Maria Torres approached, car keys in hand. Captain, you need a ride? Nah, I'll walk. It's a nice day. She smiled. It really is. As Jake walked through the streets of Las Vegas, past casinos and strip malls, past churches and schools, he thought about the long road that had brought him here. Every difficult decision, every moment of doubt, every time he'd chosen what was right over what was easy. He'd lost friends and made enemies. He'd been suspended, threatened, nearly destroyed. But he'd also found honor in unexpected places and learned that brotherhood could cross any divide. His phone buzzed one more time. A text from an unknown number. Thanks for everything, Captain, trying to be worthy of the second chance. Spark Jake smiled and texted back, Keep trying. That's all any of us can do. That night, Jake stood in his backyard, watching the stars emerge over the desert. His daughter was inside studying for college exams. His son was practicing guitar, the music drifting through the windows. Sarah sat on the porch, reading. Normal, peaceful, hard-won. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Crimes to solve, politics to navigate, the endless work of building bridges between divided communities. But tonight, Jake allowed himself to simply exist in this moment of calm. His phone sat silent on the patio table. No emergencies, no crises, no world-ending conspiracies. Just a quiet evening in the desert. A familiar rumble echoed from the highway in the distance. Motorcycles heading out into the night. Jake didn't know if they were Hell's Angels or some other club, didn't know where they were going or what they'd find when they got there. But he knew that they were riding free, same as always, and that somewhere in that freedom was the same thing he'd found in the badge. Purpose, belonging, a code to live by. Different uniforms, same honor. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. 1 year later, the Nevada Veterans Charity Ride had grown to be the largest in the state. Over 500 motorcycles lined up at Sam Boyd Stadium, riders from a dozen different clubs, putting aside rivalries for one day to support those who'd served. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd. Among them were familiar faces. Reaper and the Hells Angels in the front, Maria Torres commanding the security detail, Rick Coleman coordinating with club road captains to ensure safe routes. And Danny Spark, wearing his full patch now, earned back through a year of hard work and dedication. He'd become the club's liaison to law enforcement, a bridge between two worlds that had been at war for so long. A year ago, Jake began, his voice carrying across the field, this event was almost destroyed by violence and corruption. People on both sides of the law tried to use it to start a war. They failed because good people chose to do the right thing. He paused, looking at Reaper. I've learned a lot this past year. I've learned that honor doesn't come from a badge or a patch. It comes from choices. I've learned that the most important alliances are forged in fire, and that sometimes the people you least expect to trust become the ones you trust the most. The crowd was silent, listening. Today we ride for veterans, for people who sacrificed everything for this country, and whether you're a cop or a biker, active duty or retired, we're all riding for the same thing, freedom. The applause was thunderous. As Jake descended from the stage, Reaper was waiting. Good speech, Captain. Thanks, Mr. Kane. They both smiled at the formality, the joke that had developed between them. You riding with us today? Reaper asked. Jake gestured to his own motorcycle, a restored Harley-Davidson that Sarah had bought him for his birthday, a not-so-subtle encouragement to understand the culture he was policing. Right beside you. The ride that day was beautiful. Hundreds of motorcycles rolling through the Nevada desert, cops and bikers side by side, all of them united by something bigger than their differences. As the sun set and they returned to the stadium, Jake knew this wasn't the end of the journey. There would be setbacks, conflicts, people on both sides who couldn't let go of old hatred. But for today, riding through the desert with the wind in his face and brothers on all sides, Jake Morrison allowed himself to believe that change was possible, that honor could exist in many forms, and that sometimes the best way to uphold the law was to remember that it existed to serve people, all people, even the ones who lived on the edges, who wore different colors, who chose different paths. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but they would ride it together.